Hello there. I'm so glad you found your way here. Maybe you had a long day filled with noise and hurry, or maybe you're the kind of person who likes falling asleep to the deep and quiet whispers of ancient history, a story far removed from the concerns of today. Either way, tonight's journey is for you. You have nothing to do but rest. There are no tasks to complete, no problems to solve. Simply allow yourself this time. Let your mind relax, your breathing slow and deepen, and your body grow light, as if the weight of the world itself, with all its cares, has softened and begun to float away. Because tonight, we are not simply reading a history book. We are drifting back through the quiet millennia, to a time long before cities were built, before the first word was ever written, before even the faintest echoes of our own species had appeared on the earth. We are journeying to meet a forgotten ancestor, a silent and resilient ghost in our own human story, who walked the earth for a span of time so vast it defies the imagination. Their name is Homo Erectus, the upright human. Their story is not one of kings or of empires, of great monuments or celebrated wars. It is a story of a quiet, enduring presence that stretched like a slow, unwinding river across nearly 2 million years. It is the story of the first true, bold steps out of humanity's cradle, the story of the first mind to hold a complex thought and shape it into stone, and the story of the first small circle of warmth and light, a community gathered around a tamed and patient flame. So let your thoughts drift. Let the present day fade like a distant shoreline, its details blurring and softening. Allow your mind to travel back with me, to float gently down the deep and silent river of time, to the dawn of an upright walker. Our journey begins not with a great discovery, a famous battle, or a sudden world-altering event. It begins instead with a quiet and profound sense of time itself. To truly understand Homo erectus, we must first try to grasp the immense, almost eternal scale of their existence. Theirs is a story nearly 2 million years long. Take a moment to let that number settle in your mind. 2 million years. Our own species, Homo sapiens, with all our art, our science, our cities and our songs, has only existed for about 300,000 years. The whole of recorded human history, every pyramid ever built, every empire that has risen and fallen, the age of sail, the light of the first electric bulb and the digital glow of our modern world, all of it is just a brief flickering moment compared to the immense deep ocean of time that Homo erectus inhabited. They existed for a span of time more than 6 times longer than we have. Theirs was a dynasty measured not in the reigns of kings, but in the slow, rhythmic passing of ice ages, in millennia stacked one upon the other like layers of silent, undisturbed stone. Imagine walking a path that is 2 million steps long. The journey of our own species would take up only the last 300,000 steps. The whole of recorded civilization would be contained within the final few paces, perhaps even the last single step. The rest of that long, winding path belongs to them. This immense duration was their greatest, quietest achievement. Their success was not one of rapid conquest or explosive growth, but of incredible deep persistence. They were a species that endured. They witnessed the slow, grinding advance and retreat of massive glaciers. They saw mountains wear down into hills and watched as rivers carved new paths through ancient landscapes. They watched the very stars in the night sky drift slowly into new patterns as the earth wobbled on its long, patient axis. Their history is not found in libraries or scrolls, but in the earth itself, in layers of volcanic ash, in the fossilized pollen of long-extinct plants, and in the deep, silent strata of ancient riverbeds. They were a part of the earth in a way we can now only imagine. A species woven into the deep fabric of the planet's own slow and silent story. breathing in time with its long geological breaths. Their name, Homo erectus, tells us the next crucial part of their story. It means, quite simply, upright man or upright human. And while it's true that earlier, more ape-like human ancestors, like the famous Lucy, also walked on two legs, Homo erectus was different. They were the first to truly stand tall, to move through the world in a way that we would instantly recognise in ourselves. Imagine a being with long, graceful legs and shorter arms, a body with proportion almost identical to our own. This was a revolutionary design, a fundamental shift in how a living being relates to the world around it. It was an adaptation for endurance, for efficiency, for covering vast distances with a long, loping stride. For the first time in the human line, the hands were permanently free. Free not just for a moment to grasp a branch, but for a lifetime. Free to carry food, to carry young, to gesture and communicate. Free, most importantly, to create, to hold a stone in one hand and another in the other, and to begin the slow, patient process of invention. The eyes too were lifted higher than ever before, able to see further across the swaying grasses of the ancient savannah, to spot danger from a greater distance, or to see opportunity, a herd of grazing animals, a distant water source on a far-off horizon. This new upright posture was more than just an anatomical fact. It was a new perspective on the world. It was an invitation to travel, to walk beyond the familiar, to follow the winding path of a river, or to crest the next hill just to see what lay beyond. Their body was a perfect engine for crossing landscapes on foot, a vessel made for journeys. The way they stood was a silent statement of intent, a quiet promise to walk into the unknown. They were the first beings on Earth to look at the world from our vantage point, to feel the sun on an uplifted face, and to feel the pull of a distant landscape. And this new kind of human was born in the cradle of Africa. Their story begins there more than 2 million years ago, in the vast and dynamic landscape of the Great Rift Valley. It was a world very different from our own, a world of raw, untamed beauty. Imagine a land of sweeping grasslands, golden and green, dotted with thorny acacia trees, a place of ancient, wide, shallow lakes that shimmered under a young sun, attracting herds of enormous, long-extinct animals. This was a world alive with geological energy. The slow tearing of the continent created dramatic highlands and deep valleys, and the distant rumble of volcanoes would often paint the sky with a soft grey ash that would later preserve the secrets of this time. This world was a crucible. It was beautiful and bountiful, but it was also challenging and ever-changing. The climate shifted in long, slow cycles, turning dense, humid woodlands into open, arid savanna and back again. This constant change was the very pressure that shaped them, favouring those who were adaptable, who could travel further for food and water, who could outthink their challenges. They were not alone in this ancient world. They walked among creatures of legend, giant, long-tusked elephants, saber-toothed cats with curving fangs of bone, enormous baboons, and herds of three-toed horses. They were not yet the masters of this world, but a humble part of its complex and sometimes dangerous ecosystem, surviving through cleverness and cooperation. They were a child of this restless, vibrant earth, shaped by its deep rhythms, its sudden dangers, and its vast open spaces that called out to be explored. And to meet the challenges of this world, a quiet dawn was breaking within their minds. The brain of Homo erectus was undergoing a profound change. It was growing, becoming larger and more complex than any hominin brain that had come before it. In some cases, nearly twice the size of their predecessors. It was not yet as large as our own, but it was a magnificent, revolutionary leap forward. We should not think of this in terms of simple intelligence or IQ, but in terms of new and wondrous capabilities, this larger brain allowed for the glimmer of foresight, the ability to plan for a future that had not yet arrived. It created the capacity to hold a complex, symmetrical idea, like the perfect teardrop shape of a hand axe, within the mind, and then to patiently impose that idea onto a piece of unformed stone. This was the beginning of true creation, of shaping the world to fit a mental template. It was the ability to imagine something that did not yet exist, and then, through skill and effort, bring it into being. This growing brain was a hungry organ. It was metabolically expensive, demanding more energy and more high-quality food than a simple diet of plants could provide. This need for energy pushed Homo erectus to become better hunters, better scavengers, and more efficient foragers. It drove them to seek out energy-rich foods like meat and marrow. This in turn created a powerful and beautiful feedback loop. A smarter brain allowed them to develop the tools and strategies to acquire better food, and that better food provided the essential fuel for an even smarter, more capable brain. Their body built to run could now carry them to the hunt, and their mind, growing in complexity, could now plan it. And so here our first chapter ends, on the edge of a great and silent change. A new kind of body, tall and strong and built for endurance, stood upon the ancient African savanna, and within its skull, a new kind of mind was awakening. A mind that was beginning to see the world not just as a place of immediate survival, but as a place of endless possibility. This new human, standing tall, was looking out at the horizon, and for the very first time they had both the physical anatomy and the dawning mental capacity, not just to wonder what was beyond it, but to begin the long, slow, patient journey to go and find out. The new human, standing tall upon the ancient African savanna, did not wait for the world to come to them, and their new mind, holding the first sparks of foresight and curiosity, looked out at the endless horizon not as a boundary but as an invitation, and so they did not wait. In a movement so slow it could not be perceived in a single lifetime, in a dispersal so patient it was like the turning of the seasons, they began to walk. This was the first great journey, not of an individual, but of a species. It was a journey with no map, no destination, and no promise of safe return. It was simply a quiet, relentless, and profound expansion into the unknown. This is the story of the world walker. For millions of years, the entire story of humanity had been written on a single page within the familiar landscapes of the African continent. From the earliest, shuffling ape-like ancestors to the first tool makers, our whole lineage had unfolded within this continental cradle. But Homo erectus was the one to turn the page. They were the ones who stepped over the threshold, who broke the ancient, invisible boundary that had contained our kind for its entire existence. We must not imagine this as a grand expedition, with brave explorers setting out on a planned quest. The truth is far more subtle, and perhaps more beautiful. It was a slow, unconscious, multi-generational drift. It was the natural, inevitable expansion of a successful species into new territory. Imagine it like a slow-moving river which, after a heavy rain, begins to gently overspill its banks, its trickles and streams finding new, unexplored channels across the landscape. Or see it as the quiet, certain spread of a forest into an open meadow, with one seed at a time taking root just a little further than the last, until the whole field is shaded by new trees. This journey was made of countless small domestic decisions. It was a daughter setting up her hearth a valley over from where she was born. It was a son following a migrating herd just a little further than his father had. It was a small band, driven by a dry season or local scarcity, moving into a neighbouring territory that was richer in water or game. Each step was small, logical, and safe. But when woven together over thousands upon thousands of years, These small steps became a journey that would eventually span continents. It was an unconscious courage, the courage of resilience and adaptability, as they stepped into lands with unfamiliar plants, unknown animal calls in the night, and new, unforeseen challenges. This wasn't an invasion or a conquest. It was humanity's first quiet greeting to the wider world. Following the sun and the natural pathways of the land, they drifted north and east, out of the familiar warmth of East Africa. Their journey likely took them across lands that are now desert, but were then green and threaded with rivers. Perhaps they crossed the Sinai Peninsula, a land bridge connecting Africa to the great expanse of Asia. Or perhaps they crossed the Horn of Africa into Arabia. The exact path is lost to time, a trail of footprints washed away by a million years of rain and wind. But we know they made it. The first astonishing proof of their journey is found in a place now called Dmanisi, in the modern-day country of Georgia. Here, nestled beneath the earth, archaeologists found the remains of a small group of Homo Erectus, their simple stone tools lying beside the bones of ancient giraffes and saber-toothed cats. The age of this site is almost impossible to comprehend, 1.75 million years old. This was not a world of icy tundra, but a cool, temperate landscape and a place of woodlands and grasslands profoundly different from the African savanna they had left behind. Imagine this small band, perhaps one of the very first human families to ever see frost, or to feel the chill of a winter that was more than just a dry season. They were the vanguards, the pioneers who proved that the human body and the human mind could learn to survive, and even thrive, far from their ancestral home. And this was only the beginning. From this foothold in Western Asia, their patient dispersal continued, splitting into countless paths. Some turned west, reaching the edges of Europe. But the great slow tide of humanity flowed east. Over hundreds of thousands of years they walked into the vastness of Asia. We find their traces nicknamed Pingman in the caves of Zhukudian in China. Here, they lived for an immense stretch of time, leaving behind layers of ash from ancient fires, thousands of their simple stone tools, and the fossilized remains of the meals they ate. Others continue to follow the sun south and east through lands we now call India and Southeast Asia. The world they walked through was a different one. The sea levels were lower, and vast land bridges connected what are now islands. They walked from the mainland of Asia onto a peninsula that is now the island of Sumatra, and from there to the island of Java. Here, on this tropical island, the very first fossil of their kind was discovered, the famous Java man. They had reached the very edge of the old world, a testament to a journey of unimaginable length and duration. Each new discovery site is a pinprick of light in the deep darkness of the past, marking a single moment in a journey that lasted for 50,000 generations. They stitched the continents together with the invisible, unbreakable thread of their own footsteps, creating the first human network across the face of the globe. This journey was made possible by their single greatest attribute, a profound adaptability. This was their true superpower. It was not strength or speed, but the quiet, intelligent ability to learn the rhythms of new lands. Imagine the sheer variety of worlds they came to inhabit. They learned to live in the warm, humid, and dense bamboo forests of Southeast Asia, a world of constant green twilight and the sounds of unfamiliar insects and birds. They learned to live in the cooler, temperate woodlands of China, where the seasons were more pronounced, and where they would have seen the leaves turn colour and fall. They may have even ventured to the edges of the vast cold steppes, learning to survive in a world of wind and open sky. How did they do this? They learned. They carried the knowledge of their ancestors with them, but they also adapted it. They learned to identify new plants that were safe to eat. They learned the habits of new animals, from giant deer to ancient pandas. They discovered that a certain type of river stone in a Chinese valley was perfect for making their tools, just as a different type of flint had been back in Africa. This was not a passive process. It was an active, intelligent engagement with a new environment. This adaptation was more than just physical, it was mental and social. They had to carry crucial knowledge with them: how to find water, how to make and maintain their stone tools, how to work together to hunt, and most importantly, how to control and use fire. And they had to teach these skills to their children, ensuring that the vital cultural knowledge was not lost. Imagine a parent showing a child how to strike one stone against another, the sound echoing in a cave that had never heard it before. This was the birth of culture, a set of learned behaviours and knowledge that could be carried across the world. They did not conquer these new lands with force. They became a part of them. They learned to listen to the whispers of a new forest, to understand the scent of a coming rain on a new plain, and to find their own quiet place within these new worlds. And so, for an immense stretch of time, the earth belonged to them. For well over 1 million years, they were the dominant, and often the only, globe-trotting hominin on the planet. This was their world. We must try to imagine the deep quiet and the profound emptiness of this ancient earth. Small, scattered bands of these resilient people, perhaps a dozen or 24 individuals, separated by vast, untrodden distances. A family living in a cave in what would one day be China would have had no knowledge of their distant cousins living on the island of Java, thousands of miles away. A group hunting in a valley in Georgia would never know of the existence of those who had remained behind in the ancestral home of Africa. Yet, they were all connected. They were connected by a shared ancestry, a shared body plan, and a shared set of fundamental ideas. The idea of the hand axe, the idea of the hearth, the idea of the group. Theirs was a world of immense space, of profound silence broken only by the sounds of nature, and a deep, slow rhythm of life dictated by the rising and setting of the sun, the turning of the seasons, and the patient movement of animal herds. This long, lonely reign is the ultimate testament to their success as a species. They were not a fleeting, fragile experiment of evolution. They were a stable, enduring, and incredibly widespread form of humanity, a strong and steady trunk of our own family tree. Before us, the earth belonged to them. They were the first custodians of the human story, and they carried it patiently and successfully across the face of the planet, preparing the way, in silence and in deep time, for all who would come after. The great journey of Homo Erectus across the ancient world was a quiet testament to their resilience. It was a story written by footsteps, a slow and patient dispersal that carried the human presence into new and unknown lands. But this journey was powered by more than just strong legs and an enduring spirit. It was powered by a new kind of mind, a mind that could observe, plan, and create in a way the world had never seen before. A mind we can still see, still feel, reflected in the beautiful, symmetrical tools they held in their hands for over 1 million years. This is the story of the mind of the maker. To understand this dawning consciousness, we must look at the objects they left behind. The most common, the most iconic, and the most revealing of these is the Herculean hand axe. This was not a simple, crude rock. To see it that way is to miss the story it tells. The hand axe was a concept, an idea brought to life in stone. Imagine holding one in your hand. It is a teardrop-shaped tool, often carved from flint or quartzite. It is symmetrical, with a wide, rounded base that fits perfectly into the palm of the hand and a tapering point at the other end. Both faces are carefully worked, with a sharp edge running all the way around its perimeter. This was a profound leap from the tools that came before. The earlier stone tools were simple choppers, often just a round cobble with a few flakes knocked off one side to create a jagged edge. But the hand axe was different. It required a multi-step process, a clear mental template, and a deep understanding of the material itself. The maker had to first select the right kind of stone, one that would fracture in a predictable way. Then, using a hard hammerstone, they would strike off large flakes to create the basic shape, the rough outline of the tool. This required strength and precision, but then they would often switch to a softer hammer, a piece of bone or antler, to perform the finer, more delicate work of thinning the edges and perfecting the symmetrical shape. This process reveals a mind capable of foresight. The maker was not just thinking about the next strike of the hammerstone. They were thinking 10 steps ahead, holding a finished, three-dimensional image in their imagination and slowly, carefully removing everything that was not that image. And in the final product, we see something more than just function. We see a sense of order, a desire for balance and symmetry. Why make it so beautifully teardrop-shaped when a simpler, uglier tool might have done the job? This quiet insistence on form hints at the very first glimmer of an aesthetic sense, an appreciation for an object that was not just useful but also satisfying to hold and to behold. Was this the world's first piece of functional art? We can't know for sure, but as you trace its elegant, curving edges, you can feel the intention of a mind that was beginning to value beauty as well as utility. This tool was more than just a stone. It was an idea brought to life. A thought held in the mind, passed down through countless generations and made real over and over again for 1,000 years. And this elegant tool was also profoundly versatile. It was the world's first multi-tool, single object that could perform 1,000 different tasks. Its sharp point could be used for piercing, while its long curving edges were perfect for slicing and cutting. Its heavy base could be used for hammering or cracking open bones to get under the rich marrow inside. In the hands of its maker, it was a key, capable of unlocking the hidden nourishment and resources of the world around them. Imagine a small group of Homo erectus after a successful hunt. They would use the sharp edges of their hand axes to cut through the thick hide of an ancient elephant or a giant buffalo. They would use the strong, pointed tip to sever joints and dismember the carcass, allowing them to carry away manageable pieces. Back at their camp, the same tool would be used to slice meat from the bone, but its uses didn't end there. They would use it to dig in the earth for nutritious roots and tubers, a vital source of carbohydrates. They could use it to strip bark from trees to access edible insects or to create other simple tools from the wood. It could be used to sharpen a wooden spear or to defend the group from a lurking predator. This versatility is a direct reflection of their growing intelligence. They didn't need a different, specialized tool for every single job. Instead, they conceived of and created one powerful, elegant tool that could solve many of life's daily problems. This shows a capacity for abstract thinking, an ability to see a single object as the potential solution to a wide range of challenges. It was a triumph of efficiency and design, a simple stone transformed by a clever mind into an object of immense power and possibility. Perhaps the most remarkable part of this story is its sheer scale in both time and space. The same basic hand axe design is found everywhere Homo erectus went. We find them in the river valleys of Africa, in the caves of Europe and across the plains of Asia. And even more astonishing is the duration of this tradition. For over 1 million years they continue to make this same tool with only minor variations. Think of the fleeting nature of our own technology. A phone is obsolete in a few years. A car design lasts a decade. Our most celebrated architectural styles last a few centuries. Their core invention, their central piece of technology, lasted for a geological age. It is, by an immense margin, the longest-lasting technological tradition in all of human history. What does this incredible consistency tell us? It tells us that the idea of the hand axe was not something that had to be reinvented by each new generation. It was an idea that was taught, an idea that was successfully transmitted from one mind to another, across 1 million years and across 3 continents. This represents the first truly global cultural tradition. Imagine the scene repeated countless times. A patient elder, their hands scarred from a lifetime of working with stone, showing a younger member of the group, showing them how to hold the core, where to strike it, how to feel for the subtle changes in the stone. This implies a level of social learning, communication and tradition that was far beyond anything that had come before. It may not have been a complex grammatical language like our own. The lessons may have been taught through gestures, through imitation, through quiet guidance. But there was, without a doubt, a clear and successful transmission of complex knowledge. The hand axe was more than a tool, it was a silent language spoken in stone, a shared bond of knowledge that connected every member of their scattered global family. And the tools they made are a testament to their minds, but the places where they left them tell a deeper, more intimate story. A story of the first communities, the first homes. At sites like Zhaokudian in China or Gesher Benot Yaakov in Israel, archaeologists find not just one or two tools, but hundreds or even thousands, often in dense layers mixed with animal bones and the charred remains of ancient fires. These were not places they just passed through. These were campsites. A campsite is more than just a place on the landscape. It is a base of operations, a place of relative safety to return to at the end of a long day of foraging or hunting. It is a place to share food, to sit in the warmth of a shared fire, to care for the young and the old, and to spend hours patiently making the tools needed for the days to come. This represents the very first flicker of a concept we still hold dear. The concept of a home. The existence of these homes implies a deep and powerful social cooperation. The hunters in the group would bring back their large kill not just for themselves, but to share with everyone else. The toolmakers would craft axes that others would use. The young would be cared for by a community, not just by their parents. This social safety net was perhaps their greatest tool of all. It allowed them to hunt animals many times their own size and to defend themselves against formidable predators. It allowed individuals who were sick or injured to have a chance to recover, sheltered and fed by the efforts of their family. It was in these small cooperative groups gathered around a fire with their elegant stone tools that the foundations of human society were laid. They learned the simple, powerful and enduring idea that survival and life itself was something you did together. The mind of the maker, patient and focused, could see a finished tool within a rough stone, and the spirit of cooperation, born from necessity, was beginning to create the first true homes, places of shared safety and sustenance. But there was another presence that began to appear in these ancient camps. Something that was not made of stone or of bone, something that was not carried in the hand, but was instead invited in and nurtured. It was a flickering, living light, a shifting, breathing warmth. It was a force of nature brought into the heart of the human family. This is the story of the taming of the flame. To truly understand the importance of this moment, we must first imagine a world without it. A world dictated entirely by the sun. For millions of years, the rhythm of hominin life had been a simple one. The day was a time of light and activity, of foraging and moving through the world, but the night was a time of retreat, of deep and profound darkness. When the sun sank below the horizon, the world would shrink to a small, uncertain space, defined only by what could be heard or touched in the pitch black. The night belonged to the great predators, to the giant hyenas and saber-toothed cats, whose eyes could pierce the gloom. For our early ancestors, the setting of the sun was a curtain of fear and uncertainty falling across the land. Fire, of course, was not new to their world. They would have known it as a terrifying and destructive force. They would have seen a forest ablaze after a lightning strike, the sky thick with smoke, the air filled with the panicked cries of fleeing animals. They would have seen the glowing, molten rivers of lava from the volcanoes that rumbled in their landscape. Fire was a monster, a thing to be fled from. a symbol of nature's uncontrollable power. The great and courageous leap made by Homo erectus was to see this terrifying force not just as a danger, but as a possibility. It was a profound cognitive shift, a moment of genius born from a million small observations. Perhaps they noticed that predators kept their distance from a burning tree. Perhaps they felt the comforting warmth left behind in the earth after a brush fire had passed. At some point one of them, or a small group of them, made a decision. They decided not to run. Imagine the courage it must have taken. To consciously walk toward the shimmering heat, to brave the smoke and the crackling sound, and to carefully take a single burning branch, to see in that stick of living fire not just a weapon of destruction, but a tool, a companion, a potential ally. And then came the second challenge, to keep it alive, to feed it with dry grass and twigs, to protect it from the rain, to carry it carefully from one camp to the next. They reached into the heart of a terrifying, natural god and stole a single glowing ember. They didn't just conquer their fear of fire, they transformed that fear into an alliance. They brought a piece of the sun down to earth and made it their own. With this single profound act, their world was changed forever. The captured flame brought back to the campsite became the hearth, and the hearth became the anchor of their world. For the first time they had a circle of light in the great dark. Think of the simple, revolutionary power of this. The fire provided a constant source of warmth. This was more than just comfort. It was a key to survival. It allowed them to endure the cold of the night, which even in Africa could be significant. More importantly, it allowed them to push into new, colder territories in Asia and Europe, surviving winters that would have been impossible before. The fire was a shield against the cold, a constant radiant warmth that kept their bodies strong. The fire also gave them light. The world no longer ended at sundown. The day was extended, and the darkness was pushed back into a soft, flickering perimeter. In the gentle glow of the hearth, they could now see each other's faces. They could continue to work on their tools long after the sun had vanished. They could mend a wooden spear or tend to an injury. The fire created a small, safe and illuminated bubble in the vast dark emptiness of the night. And most critically, the fire offered protection. It was a living, breathing guardian. The crackling sound, the shifting light, and the unfamiliar scent of smoke would have been a powerful deterrent to the great nocturnal predators that once hunted them. Imagine the scene. A family huddled together, while beyond the circle of light the glowing eyes of a saber-toothed cat watch from a safe distance, unwilling to brave the mysterious dancing flames. The fire was a living fence, a wall of light and heat that kept the dangers of the night at bay. The hearth became a fixed point of warmth, light, safety in a vast and wandering life. But the transformative power of fire did not end there. It gave them a gift that would fundamentally alter their biology and fuel the growth of their minds. It gave them the gift of cooking. This discovery may have been an accident. A piece of meat dropped into the embers, a tuber left too close to the heat. But the result would have been a revelation. Food that was cooked was softer, easier to chew, and far easier to digest. The tough fibres of meat and the hard starches of roots were broken down by the heat, releasing far more nutrients and calories than you could ever get from eating them raw. This was a biological revolution. Cooking is a form of pre-digestion. By using the fire to do the first part of the work, their bodies had to expend far less energy on the digestive process. This created a huge energy surplus, a wealth of new calories that could be used for other things, and the most energy-hungry organ in the body is the brain. Many scientists now believe that the invention of cooking was the critical step that unlocked the potential for our brains to evolve to their current size and complexity. The fire became an external stomach. breaking down food before it ever touched their lips, and in doing so it provided the very fuel needed for the growth of thought, of memory, and of consciousness itself. It unlocked a whole new pantry of foods that were previously inedible or difficult to digest, making them more resilient and resourceful than ever before. And beyond these practical life-altering benefits, the fire changed something deeper. It changed how they related to one another. The hearth became the first true social centre, a magnetic point on the landscape that drew the group together at the end of each day. It was the first theatre of the human mind. Imagine the scene. The day's hunt is over, the foraging is done, the group gathers in the flickering orange light of the central fire. The anxieties of the day begin to fade, as the warmth seeps into their bones and the darkness is held back. For the first time, there is a space in the day that is not dedicated to the urgent tasks of survival. There is time. Time for what? Time for social bonding. Time for sharing food in a communal setting. Time for the older, more experienced members of the group to work on their tools, while the younger ones watched and learned. The intimate, focused setting of the campfire would have been the perfect stage for the development of more complex communication. With faces illuminated by the dancing flames, expressions and emotions would have been more visible, more readable. This new clarity would have fostered a deeper sense of empathy and connection. In the quiet hours by the fire, through gestures and sounds and shared activity, the bonds of the group were strengthened. Perhaps it was here that the first true stories were ever told. Simple narratives acted out in the firelight, the story of a successful hunt, the memory of a narrow escape. The fire did more than warm their bodies, it warmed their bonds to one another. It created a shared, sacred space, a place of community against the vast, silent backdrop of the prehistoric night. In the circle of its gentle, mesmerizing light, the first human communities were truly forged, and the long, slow, and beautiful conversation of our species finally began. In the flickering light of the first campfires, a new kind of human community was being forged. The shared warmth and the shared food were strengthening the bonds between them, and a mind capable of planning and creating was beginning to see the world in a new way. But the mind of the maker and the warmth of the hearth were anchored in a remarkable physical form. It was a body so perfectly and elegantly designed for the life they lived that its basic patterns would be passed down through 1,000,000 years of evolution, all the way to us. This was a body built for long journeys, for incredible resilience and for quiet, powerful endurance. If you could travel back in time to a ridge overlooking an ancient African savanna and see a small group of Homo Erectus walking in the distance, you might be struck by a strange sense of familiarity. Their faces and heads would seem ancient and different, but their silhouettes, their way of moving, would be unmistakably human. This is because their bodies, from the neck down, were astonishingly modern. They were the first of our ancestors to have a tall, slender frame with long legs and shorter arms, the very same proportions that we have today. This was a complete and revolutionary redesign of the hominin body. Their more ancient ancestors, like the famous Lucy, were built for a life of compromise, with bodies adapted for walking on the ground, but also for climbing in the trees. They had shorter legs and longer, more powerful arms. But Homo erectus had made a definitive choice. They had committed fully and irrevocably to a life lived on the ground. Their long, strong leg bones, the femur and the tibia, were built for an efficient, striding gait. Their pelvis was shaped not for climbing, but for stabilizing the torso during long periods of walking and running, and their feet, with a well-developed arch, acted as perfect shock absorbers, cushioning each step of a long journey. This new body plan was a declaration of intent. It left the world of the trees and the ancestral past far behind. It was a body designed to be a master of the open plains, a perfect engine for long-distance travel. In a way, Their very bones tell a story of commitment, a commitment to a new way of life, a commitment to the long journey, and a commitment to a future that would be found not by climbing to escape the world, but by walking forward to meet it, stride after patient stride across the horizon. And this remarkable body was capable of something truly extraordinary. It was a body born to run. We must not think of this in terms of explosive sprinting speed. They could not outrun a lion or a cheetah over a short distance. But they possessed a different, and perhaps more powerful kind of athleticism. They were the first great endurance athletes of the prehistoric world. Their bodies were perfectly adapted for what scientists now call persistence hunting. It was a strategy of quiet patience and incredible stamina. The hunt would begin not with a frantic chase, but with a slow, steady pursuit. A small group of hunters would single out a large animal, an antelope or a kudu, and begin to follow it at a steady, relentless trot. The animal, being faster, would easily sprint away, but it could not escape. The hunters would simply follow its tracks, jogging patiently, keeping it in sight, forcing it to run again and again under the heat of the midday sun. Most four-legged animals covered in thick fur cannot cool themselves efficiently over long distances. They rely on panting to release heat, and they cannot pant while galloping. Eventually they are forced to stop and rest, or they will overheat. But Homo erectus had a secret weapon. Their bodies, tall and slender, had lost their thick coat of fur and were covered instead with millions of sweat glands. They had evolved the most efficient cooling system in the animal kingdom. As they ran, their bodies would be covered in a sheen of sweat which would evaporate in the breeze, carrying away the heat generated by their muscles. They could keep going for hours. Their long legs, with their springy Achilles tendons, stored and released energy with every stride, making their trot incredibly efficient. A special ligament in the back of their neck, the nuchal ligament, held their heads steady as they ran, allowing their eyes to remain fixed on their prey. And so the strange, slow-motion chase would continue across the savannah. The animal would sprint and then rest, and each time it rested, the hunters would be a little closer, their steady, rhythmic pace never breaking. Eventually, after hours of this relentless pursuit, the animal, exhausted and dangerously overheated, would simply collapse. The hunt was won not with brute strength or overwhelming speed, but with the quiet, incredible power of endurance. They learned that victory did not always belong to the swift, but to the steady. Their greatest weapon was their own patient, enduring heartbeat, a rhythm that could outlast the frantic pace of their prey. This new ability to hunt large animals, combined with their clever stone tools and the transformative power of fire, profoundly changed their diet. For the first time, a steady, reliable supply of high-quality meat and fat became a central part of human life. This new energy-rich diet had a direct and visible effect on their anatomy, not just fueling their brains, but literally reshaping their faces. If you were to look at the skull of an earlier ancestor, you would see a large projecting jaw and enormous flat molar teeth, like grinding stones. This was the machinery needed to spend hours each day chewing tough, fibrous plants. But as Homo erectus began to use tools to cut meat and fire to soften their food, this heavy-duty dental hardware was no longer needed. Over thousands of generations, their faces began to change. Their teeth, especially their molars, became smaller and more delicate. Their jaws became less massive, receding back underneath the skull. Their own ingenuity was sculpting their evolution. The hand axe that sliced through meat meant there was less need for powerful, tearing front teeth. The fire that softened tough roots meant there was less need for huge, grinding molars and the massive jaw muscles required to power them. Their face was becoming less of a food processing machine and more like our own, flatter, more vertical, and tucked neatly beneath a rapidly expanding brain case. The story of their cleverness was written not only in the stones they shaped so carefully, but in the very bones of their own faces, a silent testament to a mind that was beginning to master its world rather than just be shaped by it. But their bones tell us more than just stories of hunts and long journeys. Some very rare fossils tell a quieter, more profound story, a story of compassion. In Dmanisi, Georgia, archaeologists found the skull of an individual now known as the Old Man. He had lost all but one of his teeth long before he died. In a world of tough raw foods, he would have been completely unable to chew. He could not have survived for a week on his own. The only way he could have lived for months or even years in this condition is if others in his group were caring for him. They must have been processing his food for him, perhaps pounding it into a paste or giving him the softest pieces of meat and the rich liquid marrow from the bones. Other fossils from around the world show similar evidence, skeletons with badly broken legs that had healed, but in a way that would have left the individual with a permanent crippling limp. A lone hominin with such an injury would have quickly fallen prey to a predator or starved. The fact that they survived for years after the injury tells us that they were not abandoned. They were protected, they were fed, and they were kept safe by their group. This is perhaps the most human thing we can know about them. It is the first fossil evidence of a deep and powerful social bond, of an instinct to care for the weak, the old, and the injured. It hints at a world where the value of an individual was not just based on their ability to hunt or to walk. This was the birth of compassion, a recognition that the group was a family, and that its members had a responsibility to one another. Their bones tell us of their incredible physical endurance, but the healed fractures and the toothless jaws tell a quieter, more profound story. They tell us that the true strength of Homo erectus was not just in their long legs or their clever tools, but in their bonds to one another. The simple, powerful, and deeply human idea that a family, a community, takes care of its own. In the ancient bones of Homo erectus, we can read a story of a body built to endure. We see a frame designed for long journeys, a skeleton that speaks of a life of movement and resilience. But in the healed fractures and the toothless jaws of the old and the injured, we read a quieter, more profound story. A story of compassion, of a community that cared for its own, a silent testament to the dawning of a truly human spirit. And yet, after a reign that stretched across an almost unimaginable span of time, after walking the earth for nearly 2 million years, their long, quiet story comes to an end. A species that had been the first to carry the human presence across the entire old world eventually, and gently vanished from it. Their footsteps fade, and their fires go out one by one. This is their final chapter, a story of a fading legacy, and of the faint, timeless echoes they left behind for us to find in the deep silence of the past. Their disappearance, like their journey across the globe, was not a single, sudden, or dramatic event. There was no great cataclysm, no single moment of extinction. Instead, it was a slow fade, a long goodbye. It was a mosaic of endings that happened at different times in different parts of the world, a testament to the sheer scale of their ancient scattered family. The populations in their ancestral homeland of Africa and those in much of Asia and Europe seem to have vanished first, hundreds of thousands of years ago. Their numbers dwindled, their territories shrank, and they were slowly replaced by new kinds of humans that had evolved and were spreading across the land. But in some isolated pockets of the world, they held on, their ancient way of life continuing like a living memory of a much older time. The last Homo erectus lived in Java, Indonesia, around 117,000 years ago, even as Homo sapiens and Neanderthals thrived elsewhere. This isolated group, unaware of their singularity, continued their ancient way of life. Their demise was a slow fade, not a sudden event. In their final millennia, they shared the planet with new human species like Neanderthals, Denisovans, and Homo sapiens. While direct encounters were likely rare and fleeting, these different human groups briefly shared the same landscapes. A unique period in Earth's history, So why did their long, successful journey finally come to an end? There is no single simple answer to this profound and gentle mystery. Their long goodbye was likely caused by a convergence of slow, deep changes. The world itself was transforming. The climate was entering a period of intense and rapid fluctuations, the Great Ice Ages. Environments could change dramatically in just a few generations, turning warm, stable forests into open, cold grasslands. Their ancient way of life, so perfectly adapted to a slower, more stable world, may not have been flexible enough to keep up with these sudden shifts. And there was the new competition. The new humans, particularly Homo sapiens, were different. We arrived with a new kind of mind, a mind that seems to have been capable of more abstract thought, more complex symbolic communication. We brought with us a more advanced and rapidly evolving toolkit, lighter, more specialized stone blades, tools made from bone and antler, and most critically, true projectile weapons like finely balanced throwing spears. We could hunt from a distance, a safer and more effective strategy. Their greatest strength, the million-year-old tradition of the hand axe, may have ultimately become a weakness. It was a perfect all-purpose tool for a stable world, but it did not change or adapt quickly. The newcomers were innovating at a dizzying pace, and so it was likely a quiet, slow-motion process of being out-competed and out-adapted. Their fire did not go out in a sudden gust of wind. Instead, it seems to have slowly burned down, ember by ember, as the world changed around it, until only the cold ash of memory was left for us to find. But to speak only of their ending is to miss the meaning of their story. For their legacy is all around us, and it is within us. While the species itself is gone, their achievements were the very foundation upon which everything that followed was built. They were the great pioneers. They were the first to stand tall and commit to a life on the ground. They were the first to have the courage to step out of Africa and greet the wider world. They were the first to hold a complex idea in their mind and shape it into a beautiful, symmetrical tool. They were the first to tame the wildness of fire and turn it into a source of warmth, safety, and community. And they were the first to show the kind of compassion that would allow the old and the weak to be cared for. The first to truly understand that we survive together. Every single one of these breakthroughs was a necessary chapter in the human story, a vital step on the path that led to us. We are standing on the foundation that they built patiently and resiliently over 2 million years. They are the deep ancestral root of our own wandering human spirit. The impulse to see what is over the next hill, the curiosity that drives us to explore new worlds, is a faint, powerful echo of the first great journey they began so long ago. And now, our own quiet journey through their time comes to an end. We have walked with them out of the African cradle and across the ancient continents. We have sat by their fires, held their tools in our minds, and felt the quiet strength of their enduring bodies. We have witnessed their stories, from its dawn to its long, gentle twilight. The resilience that carried them across an older, wilder world, the curiosity that led them to tame a flame, the compassion that led them to care for their own. These are not alien concepts. These are the ancient echoes that still live within the human story, a deep and quiet inheritance passed down to us through the immense river of time. And now, as their ancient world fades completely into dream, you can let your own journey of the day go. Let the thoughts and worries of your waking hours soften and dissolve. There is nothing left to do but rest, floating in the deep, quiet river of time, safe in the knowledge that you are a part of a story so much older, so much deeper, and so much vaster than you can imagine. Well,